inside this squad car, and there's everything else outside of it. After tonight, you're either gonna figure this out, or this job is gonna eat you alive.
Hey everybody, I am here with Joel Souza, who is the writer-director of a film that is now available, as you can see across the bottom, Crown Vic, that's on most of your video on demand, if not all of your video on demand services. It's a cop thriller starring Thomas Jane, and it played when we recorded this. It was Sunday, the 21st at Cinequest with Q&A with Alec Baldwin and Thomas Jane, and was David Krumholtz? Did he join as well?
He was not in there. It was Alec, me, Jane, and a couple of our producers, Greg and Angel.
Yeah. Okay. Well, anyway, so welcome, Joe. Thank you for taking some time tonight to talk with me about the film.
Oh, happy to. Thank you.
And let's, we talked a couple of days ago, and you've got kind of an interesting backstory to yourself here. You are in Fremont, the San Francisco Bay Area, working as a screenwriter and now as a feature film director. Kind of removed from Hollywood, but hey, the Bay Area does have a thriving film and television scene. But you didn't shoot it there either. You're in Buffalo, standing in for Los Angeles. So, how the heck did all that come to pass and work for you?
It's interesting. We were originally going to shoot it in an area, part of LA called Boyle Heights, which I love. I love that area, and I love you can go up into the foothills and you get these amazing looks down into downtown from there. And it just kind of had the flavor of everything I wanted for it. You drive around and you can hear sort of salsa music emanating from windows as you pass by. I love that place. And that's, the movie takes place just in a little west of that. And so that was where we were going to be ultimately. And that's back when Alec was going to star in the movie in the role Thomas Jane ultimately played. But we had a sort of number of stops and starts, as are common with indie films. It can be a little painful. But that happened, and the calendar kind of ran out on us with Alec. It just became an impossibility for him to do it. He stayed on as producer, a very gung-ho producer, which has been great. But we needed to recast, which we did, and we were really lucky to get Thomas. He's who I wanted when we couldn't have Alec do it. I've been a fan for a long time. But by the same token, when you're doing indie films, you have to chase the tax incentive, and we weren't going to get the California tax incentive. And so we looked around a lot of different places. We looked around. Everyone seems to be going to Georgia of late. We looked around Atlanta, and it could have worked well for our needs. But our producer, Angel, said, hey, take a look at Buffalo. Don't sleep on Buffalo. It's going to be closer than you think to what you need. And so I did, and I started to be very interested when you particularly look at their downtown area. The streets are wide, the street colors are the same sign, the traffic lights look the same. There's a real sort of you can really pass, I thought, for LA, minus the palm trees, which are movies at night, and when you're driving around LA at night, you don't see the palm trees anyway. They're the most of the trees above the streetlights anyhow, so you don't see them. And so I thought, we could really make this work. It's, the population is much smaller in Buffalo, so there's a lot more aspects of that we can control. The film commission was fantastic. They worked with us a ton. The local PD worked with us a lot. And it turned out to be the best thing for us. I'm not going to say it was easy. Our first night of filming was the summer solstice. Almost aside from the first scene, this bank robbery scene, the whole thing takes place at night. And so we started our first day. Was the shortest day of the year, or the shortest night of the year, I should say. I'm sorry, the longest day of the year, the shortest night. And so we had, we needed that sort of profound darkness. And I think we might have had, just in terms of camera time, maybe 7 hours a night. So we're always chasing it, always kind of rushing after it. But we managed to get what we needed.
Yeah. Yeah, and I should say for people that haven't seen it yet, yes, it is one night, the first night of a rookie patrolman along with a 25-year veteran. That's Thomas Jane. And so what sparked that idea? I mean, because both, I want to say it's a subgenre in and of itself, but the story of that first night for the rookie is fairly common, though I think this is interesting, fresh take on it. But what sparked it for you, and why do you think this endures as a thing that people want to tell stories about?
It's interesting. When I first sat down to do it, I mean, you can see this in my filmography on IMDb. I had like family movies in my roster there, and I had done those because those are sort of the opportunities that came in front of me, and my kids can watch them, and that's great. But Crown Vic is sort of more the thing I've always wanted to do when I can do my own thing, and so I had just decided I was going to sit down and write just some pages of dialogue of two men talking in a car, two police officers, just as a dialogue exercise, because I sort of felt like I'd gotten away from that a little bit. And I'd just sort of done so many years of research in terms of police and everything. I just wanted to put that to use. So I did that, and I just kind of kept going and going and going and going until I realized I had about 70 pages of dialogue here. And I thought, I wonder if I can sort of fashion this into something that resembles a movie. Let's see. And then relatively quickly, I was able to do that. And I think I had a script within around 10 or 11 days, which is pretty quick. And for me, pretty unusual. I usually take a few months. But there was not a lot of second guessing going on. And that's great. When you can write just fast, and just sort of, you don't second guess yourself, and you're not wondering if this is going to work, and you're not just sort of overthinking everything. The faster you can go, the better in that regard, I think. And so, yeah, I had this script. I've always sort of been fascinated by the shop talk and the jargon and just kind of the personalities of cops. And so I decided, I'm gonna take a crack at this. And ultimately the movie ended up a little sort of bigger than that original draft. Originally, I was gonna go like Lock style, where they never get out and the camera never leaves the car. But obviously, it sort of grew beyond that. So,
well, that would have been a lot easier on the budget. But,
yeah, we could have just rented a process trailer and driven around wherever for about 7 nights instead of what we did. But
in your family, do you have law enforcement background, or
not direct? I've got some cousins, but in my younger days, I had done a few ride-alongs and things like that, and I've always just sort of read and researched a lot and kind of read up on the LAPD. Particularly, I think growing up in Northern California, you have this fascination with the southern half of the state. I always sort of felt like, as a kid, I'm like, in Northern California, you're sort of envious of Southern California, and Southern California is vaguely aware we exist up here. And
that's fair.
So but I was always sort of fascinated with these LA crime stories I grew up on. There's obviously The Heat and LA Confidential and those movies, and I think To Live and Die in LA was kind of the big one for me.
Mm-hmm.
Those are sort of what I was always after. I just kind of like I don't. It's sort of hard to explain. I think I grew up in the suburbs of Northern California, so you don't directly interact with police that much where I grew up. It's they sort of patrol. It's a very benign sort of thing. And I think a lot of people have very, very dramatically different experiences with that, and I've kind of been fascinated by seeing what that was.
Well, and that's an interesting. I mean, we'll jump to the serious question about that. Is you've been working on this film since, I don't really know when you started writing the script, but it was finished in 2019, and now it's kind of, we're aware of it now in 2021, and a lot has happened in the last couple of years. When you speak, I think that's a good distinction, that when you're in the suburbs, it's not the same as being deep in the urban environment. But the public's attitudes for police, I don't know if I'd say it's 100% shifted, but we're a lot more divided than we were 2 years ago.
Oh, I mean, look, I wrote the movie 5 years ago, and we don't live in this world that's sort of frozen in amber, right? I mean, things change rapidly, particularly on this front. And so from the time when I wrote it, I had always kind of intended it was, at its heart, it was a movie about two men getting to know each other over the course of one night in a car. And I've always sort of been fascinated by that dynamic, people in a car, back to American Graffiti, where you sort of are driving around late at night with, and you kind of can't escape each other, the other person in the car. And so I thought it would be an interesting look. I remember originally sort of thinking, it was like, if I was sort of stuck with my younger self, what would I warn myself about? What would I tell myself? And I thought, well, it's interesting, the dynamic then, if you look at a young cop who's just starting out, although he has been a cop for a few years, but sort of more like as a The character says he's been working almost as a security guard. He was sort of a glorified security guard, and this is his first night on the street, and he feels like he has something to prove. But I thought, what's it like if you have this older cop and the younger cop? They're basically the same person. And you look at the younger cop, is this cop 25 years ago, and Jane is this guy 25 years from now, and if he makes sort of the same mistakes that Jane's character has made over the course of his life. And so it was always more about that than anything else. And then, but as you go on, you take a couple of years, you're trying to get your movie made, and then the world is in a different place even then. And things are starting to happen. And this is sort of pre-Eric Floyd and all that. And then by the time the movie comes out, there's a lot more things that have come to light and a lot more troubling things that have come to light. And the world is sort of looking at, I think the world has been sort of on that path of looking at the police differently for a while now. I think particularly with like the militarization of cops and this sort of distance that has grown over the years. It used to be, I think, there used to be this real sort of come here, I'm here to help aspect with police. And now it seems to all be stand back. It's get away, back off. There's a real sort of distance between cops and the neighborhoods and that they patrol and the people that they're looking out for. I think so. There's that huge bridge. It keeps getting wider and wider. And I think, it certainly has widened in the 5 years since I wrote it until now. It's been an interesting time to have made a cop movie when we didn't really intend any kind of political statement to it, but that's naive to think that, you make a police movie that's not like Lethal Weapon 6 and that people are not going to have some sort of reaction to it very strongly one way or the other. People who are very supportive of police might see it through that viewpoint and think that I'm tearing down the police, and people who take issue with the things the police do and would sort of see that as me building up the police. So I think, I can't control how people see it. I can sort of control the message I wanted to send. And the message I wanted to send is it's a difficult job done by men who are not perfect. And I think, it's, I think there's a lot of work to be done on behalf of the police to try to reach out and sort of rebuild those bridges, I think, because the trust has in very large part been lost.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting as I took it that also Thomas Jane's character, I would have expected the rookie to be like, I can't believe this is how police work goes, but Thomas Jane's character has a couple of lines that really feel like he's against the militarization as well. There's kind of a dismissal of that they're not the people that are reaching out in the community, though he is far from a perfect person to be reaching out in the community as well. So let me talk about Thomas Jane because he's an interesting actor. I'm with you 100%. Done so, certainly, obviously for Fanboy Planet viewers, he's on The Expanse. He's very complicated. He's great on that. But I don't necessarily see him and Alec Baldwin as the same type of actor either. So what made Thomas Jane the guy that you really wanted to step into that role?
Yeah, it's interesting. Somebody once asked me, they said, do you picture actors when you're writing for them? And fortunately I don't, because I think you can sort of squeeze yourself into some narrow directions there. In a weird way, everything I write, I swear I'm looking at some iteration of Steve McQueen. It's like, that's who I don't, at various points, there's, sometimes it's the Wanted Dead or Alive Steve McQueen. Sometimes, it's Great Escape and everything in between. And so I think, but that gives me sort of a basic, what that gives me is a sort of archetype for how I want the character to be, right? It's not what McQueen was, but it's the image he presented. And once Alec wasn't available, I kind of really quickly went to Thomas Jane because I had appreciated so many of his performances. And going back to, obviously, I think we all sort of met him, on Boogie Nights. But I think when you go back, like he has a great scene in The Thin Red Line where his character's been injured and he's just, but not badly, and he's waiting up on this hill for the next patrol to come by so we can go back with them. And it's just this fantastic scene, and he's so great in it. And it's not a long scene or anything, but I just I'd rewatched that again, and I thought, there's this gear I've always felt like was there, which was this character, this Ray Mandel character. I just kind of had a feeling he'd be able to do it. And then when we spoke, he kind of got it from Jump Street. He got exactly what I was looking for. It's this character who's, you know, this is a blue collar guy who doesn't have handy access to his emotions. It's, you know, that's sort of, it's like a Springsteen song, right? It's his complex emotional states explored through a very plain spoken vehicle.
Yeah, it's not easy to judge the character. I mean, you know, it's clear the rookie wants to, you know, and keeps in, and then there's a surprise, even to the extent, and I won't spoil the line itself, but it's an incredibly impactful closing to this, you know, and for lack of a better word, literate, and perhaps even to some extent, you know, unexpectedly so, and for that character to have that kind of attitude. So, you know, is that your philosophy coming through?
You know, it isn't. It's funny that the entire movie exists to get to that scene for me. I wrote that scene before I wrote anything, and I just while I disagree with the sentiment of this, it's a very cynical and dark sentiment that he exudes at the end of this movie when they've had this very rough and eventful night, and at the end of which he sort of is going to tell this kid, okay, here's the deal. You know, anything I might have said to you that just, if you didn't listen to any of it, listen to this. And then he sort of shows this very dark philosophy about the world and where he thinks police fit in with society. And I don't believe that that's how police should fit in with society, but I do believe that when there are men who have done that job, as long as this character has, that this is where they end up. It's not great, you know. And I think for what I hope people take away from that is that when we get to that scene, that it's not me saying, see, that it's all worth it. The way these guys have to be with the public, the juice is worth that squeeze. To me, it's not. I think it's just, I intended it to be sort of a dark moment where this character kind of spills his guts about what he really thinks, and we should be sort of shaken by that.
And I think I was. So let me.
He does it so great too. It was fun to watch. I mean, everybody it was a long night shooting in this parking garage all night, and that was our last thing because we wanted to get it while the sun was coming up because that's the end of their night.
Right.
And everyone was exhausted, but everyone was sort of just riveted to the monitor, to Luke too, because Luke's just sitting there and listening to this, and he's sort of, you know, and he's just, it's all wordless for him how he's hearing this and what it means to him and all the crap he's been through over the course of this night, how that's hitting him. And it was a really fun one. Those are the fun days when you get to hear your dialogue spoken that well.
And they are a great pairing. I want to say that, you know, this is, as that old adage goes, you know, acting is reacting, and Luke has a lot of that. And he's up against a very intense actor in Tom. I mean, I've encountered Thomas a couple of times at Comic-Con, and even casually, he's intense. We know that. You know?
He is, but you know what? It's like it's a really sweet intense.
Yes.
Very
I'm
like
nice
guy, man, and he is as comfortable in his own skin as anybody I've ever known, and I find a great deal to envy in that.
Yeah,
because many of us are not. But it's not that he's not, you know, one of those who's not cursed with self-awareness. He's very self-aware, and he was just a gentleman the whole way across with us, and a real collaborator. We would go and break these scenes down the nights before we were doing them, and he had a lot of fantastic ideas, and like I said, but he sort of had the character from Jump Street. You know, when he first started saying it, I thought, oh boy, that's how I heard it. We're onto something. So.
Yeah, I'm going to ask about that because I've seen a couple of films recently with LAPD having that particular argot, you know, almost like an accent that I first was thinking was kind of New York. And I think I know a couple of police officers down here, but is that really all that common? Just because I'm seeing it across films, and
you know what I found fascinating by it is that, you know, like I can hear Thomas in that movie and I could swear I hear like a little Midwest. He's not from the Midwest. And in reality, Thomas is not. He's from Maryland, I believe. And but there is this sort of very almost clipped, stilted Midwesternness to the way he's saying it. And it's fascinating to me that he just had that. Because when we talked about it, I said, when you get into these sort of deep dig on the character, which I don't, because just for me as a writer, and we don't get into that. But the deep, deep, deep dig, it's like, I think there's a good chance this guy like grew up in Nebraska till he was 10, and then his parents moved out to LA or somewhere in the North Dakota, somewhere, Illinois, something. There's a real sort of interesting kind of, I know countenance is a facial term, but almost a full physical countenance that feels very Midwestern to me in the movie from him.
Yeah,
and it's exactly sort of in an unspoken way what I wanted.
That clicks. So, as I understand it, this film is you're nearing the end of the cycle as far as it's played Cinequest. I think partially because you were local and they wanted to tout that,
which I was so happy about. Yeah.
But it has been well. That's one of the great things about Cinequest. But it is also it's been on demand for a little bit, and so now the question is, Joel, what's next?
Yeah, it is definitely sort of at the end of its run, and it's sort of a nice moment to have it sort of, stop here, back home for me. It's Cinequest.
Yeah.
I went to college at De Anza in Cupertino, and their wonderful film program. And I think I was at like the second or third Cinequest ever. It was like right there when it was very small in its very early years. But I was always so cool, and I was always blown away by it. And it grew into such a big and great festival. But so moving on to the next stuff, yeah, I've got there's a Western that Alec and I have put together that I wrote, and that we've been sort of pushing that very large boulder uphill for the last year or so. And I think, fingers crossed, if things don't fall apart, which they do in the independent film world, you take a lot of kicks to the stomach, unfortunately. If things can sort of hang together on that, I think we have a really good shot at doing it in the fall. I've always wanted to do a Western. Who doesn't? If you're making a movie, I think what Walter Hill talked about, I think it was The Long Riders, maybe, he said, if they knew we were having this much fun, they wouldn't let us do it. And so that's for me coming up. And then, so hopefully we'll get to do that. It's a great, great part for Alec. And beyond that, I've got another, I sort of wanted to, I think we're all, big fans of movies like, No Country for Old Men and Hell or High Water and that kind of, that Taylor Sheridan world of Texas and places like that. So I had written a script that is called The Lowlands that takes place in that world. It's sort of a father-daughter movie, but sort of in crime and these sort of empty spaces of these parts of Texas that I find very, very interesting. And hopefully we'll be able to mount that one up. But most directly, it's that Western called Rust, and I have very, very high hopes for it. We've been getting a hell of a reaction from the script, which is always nice. And I think it could be something pretty cool. So.
Okay, well then I look forward to that, and the best of luck with that. Thank you again for joining me tonight, and hopefully we'll see you around on the circuit again.
Yeah, thanks so much. It was really nice meeting you. I had a blast. Thanks a lot.
Thanks for watching. Hit the subscribe button to make sure you don't miss out on any Fanboy Planet videos. And remember, use your powers for good.